It's the My Michelle Live podcast.
My Michelle Live.
Hey. I'm Michelle Mendoza. Happy to be ending the week with you as we look at what we call a week in review. Our week in review takes on some of the big news stories of the week, and I'm finding that as much as I love to do this, I'm realizing that what we're doing is of vital importance. It's not just me, but everybody who is reporting news that you may not be hearing. And I'm not talking about just opining about conspiracy theories. That's important too. It's free speech. It challenges a narrative, and challenge makes things better, right? If the Olympics just gave out gold medals to everybody and no one had to challenge each other for it, wouldn't be much of an event, any of them, right? But I am talking about those of us who are reporting things that we dig deep, we're researching, making sure that to the best of our ability that these are confirmed cases and news stories. What the media used to do, we're reporting things that are being canceled in some instances. And because we're doing that, the more of us who have these voices and the more of you who listen and like and comment, the more people can get all of the information, and we can make the world better. It is so important. And that is what we are doing today. We are doing it with our friend. He's my co-host in a weekend review, Adam Rizzieri. And that's why we call it the Riz Report. And we are welcoming Adam. He even has a pretty groovy soundbite that we're going to play for you because that's what we're doing. It gives Big Voice Guy, just give me a second, Adam. I want to make sure that Big Voice Guy gets his day.
Let's review the week. The Riz Report with Adam Rizzieri.
There you go.
There we go. Hey, everybody. Great to be with you. Adam Rizzieri here, just keeping it real with the one and only Michelle Mendoza. We've got quite an episode today. I think some really important things to go over. And, you know, before the show started today, Michelle and I were just kind of talking a little bit of a sidebar conversation.
Yes.
Just kind of realizing how truly important this stuff is, the conversations that we have. Because really, there's just not quite enough coverage on some of these topics. And these are things that truly matter. They're things that not only impact our society at a high level, but they get really close to home as well. So I think that today we're going to kind of go over some topics that definitely have been relevant, you know, specific to this week. But then at the same time, some of these are kind of more, I guess you might say, topics that have been kind of following us since the inauguration. And of course, before then too, COVID, the border crisis is a big deal. Things that our cities are experiencing, things that our police forces are experiencing, and then just kind of looking forward to, Michelle. I mean, we've heard things, right? Like get vaccinated and you don't have to wear a mask. But now we're hearing different things. You know, get vaccinated, and you know what? Actually, whether you're vaccinated or not, you're gonna have to wear a mask. I'm sorry. Or even the extreme, right? You can't travel to certain places now without proof of vaccination. I mean, things are getting a little out of hand, Michelle. I'm kind of wondering, how do we sort of digest all this stuff? Where do we start?
Well, I want to start basically with the border crisis, and here's why. We're not hearing really much about it. If you're following the media, there's been some good reporting. There's been some unfortunate reporting on sexual abuse in some of the facilities, but we're not really hearing everything that's going on. So maybe we can get just an update. And I live very close to the border. It's just the Canadian border. So that's why I say we're not hearing it. Maybe you're hearing more in the way of border issues in Texas, where you're headquartered. I'm
just imagining like a flood of like really comfortable flannel shirts on your side of the border. Like that's you're like, oh my gosh, all this flannel.
We're coming to America. Love you, Canada.
We are ready for the winter. Okay, then we do love you guys.
Anytime. Come on,
we love you guys, and you are just
bring your
so generally polite and just good people in general. We
I
do
have
appreciate
stories
it.
about how. Can I just tell you how polite Canada is, Adam? I was up in Toronto for the MLS Cup. My team is the Seattle Sounders. We were playing in the MLS Cup. Our team lost, and I am decked out in colors. Right, you can tell I'm from Seattle. I'm walking the streets, and every 15 steps, some really nice Canadian was coming up and saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry for your loss.
Sorry, right? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm so sorry for your loss, eh? I hope you I hope you enjoy our city and have a good time anyway." And I just wanted to say, could you just leave me the freaking heck alone for a few minutes? I want to not
Yeah.
like you. My team lost.
I want to not like you, but man, you're really nice. And like, maybe we should just go have some beers later on.
And then if you cross the other side of the border into Mexico, man, nice people as well. A lot of people who have nothing will give you the last of what they have in generosity.
Very
It is
true.
a beautiful, beautiful country. And they're being victimized too by some of the migration.
Very much so. I mean, we're talking about migration coming from mostly Central America, waving through Mexico, and obviously putting a huge strain on the towns, the local communities, the support structure for a country that's already, trying to deal with some stuff. And so, it was interesting this week, Michelle. I saw a tweet come from Congressman Steve Scalise, and he was just kind of pointing something out that he noticed, and it was, in his tweet, he said, more illegal immigrants have crossed the southern border this year than the population of these cities: Boston, Austin, Jacksonville, Charlotte, San Francisco, Nashville, Denver, Seattle, New Orleans, Washington, D.C., and it's not stopping. It's really kind of crazy to think about this. And when you kind of like scale in or kind of hone in on what this might look like in a small town, think about McAllen, Texas, near the border. The mayor of McAllen, Javier Villalobos, he just had to declare a disaster in his city. They had about 7,000 migrants released into their city last week, and they're kind of, out of that 7,000 alone, 1,500 of them were COVID positive. On any given day, typically in McAllen, you'll see about 1,800 per day or so, with a COVID rate of about 15%. This is in a city that is really actually quite small, about 142,000 people in McAllen. So if you think about 1,800 migrants coming into that city per day, and then multiply that by 365 days out of the year, you're talking about 657,000 people flooding through a city of 141,000. I mean, it's freaking nuts to really think about. Just the toll that this takes on a city that doesn't really have a big tax base to support, the kind of public services that you need to, clean up after and take care of all of the people and all of that activity going through just one small town. But, scale back, right? Looking at the big cities in America, man, the Biden border crisis has converged to create, a lot of fuel behind COVID discussions, and then of course also drugs in our country.
Okay, let me ask you, why is this the Biden border crisis? Didn't it start before him? Why are we putting it all on his shoulders right now?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at data, right, the amount of border crossings in all of 2020 in general, quite low, actually. This all started right around the inauguration, like the week of. And so you talk about going from historical lows in border crossings to then almost 200,000 border crossings a month, Michelle. Like, how did that just happen overnight? Like, it's almost like a flip was switched, or it's almost like a different president took the throne, took the gavel, and everything changed, right? You saw people coming across the border wearing shirts that said Biden on them. You saw people coming across the border that said, "We're coming because Biden invited us into the country."
Yeah.
And of course,
I had the soundbite. I don't know. I'm not going to dig it out, but he said, I don't know. Maybe they're just coming because I'm a good guy. So my question is, why is the federal government trying to put so much effort on COVID, not reporting all of the COVID story, which could protect those of you who have been vaccinated? Okay, there's some dangers there, and you'll need to know about them to navigate maybe some problems down the road with this experimental drug, right? And there's some information that can help you, but we don't want to talk about it because it goes against the narrative. The federal government is is pushing COVID, but they're completely ignoring the border crisis and thousands of illegal immigrants that are coming across the border, as you mentioned, Steve Scalise's post. But they're COVID positive. A lot of them have been COVID positive. We're not testing them. We're not saying, as we are for many restaurants now, New York City, that you can't come in without being vaccinated. We're not saying that, and we're not vaccinating them upon arrival.
I was talking to my wife about this, and she kind of shared with me this theory about the border situation and vaccines. And if you recall, at one point, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, the one-shot dead virus vaccine, was being distributed pretty quickly through our country. The same day that my brother actually got that particular vaccine, they pulled it, and then they started reallocating its use towards the border because it's a one-shot vaccine, easier to administer, easier to store, all that kind of stuff. And so she was like, well, what if the media and what if the administrators were just trying to scare the public so that they could reallocate this one-shot vaccine to the border to try and mitigate the issue there without people being pissed about, a potentially good vaccine being used on people that are not Americans. And I was just like, maybe there's something to that. But
I don't know what's going on, but we aren't vaccinating the people who are coming in, and many of the people who are coming in with open borders, we're not like saying, oh, okay, come on in and check in here. They're coming in and just assimilating into society without being tested, without being vaccinated. And are they going? Go ahead.
Well, even still, they have lesser quarantine policies, right? Like the standard with COVID early on was, well, if you have COVID, then you have to quarantine for 2 weeks, right? Well, if you cross the border and you have COVID, you have to quarantine for like 10 days. Like, why is there a different standard? Oh, it's because it's really hard for DHS for HHS to house and feed and take care of almost 200,000 people per month, incremental. It's just a strain on resources. So it's a joke. I mean, even like the 6-foot social distancing thing. Well, if COVID is an aerosol and, an aerosol can travel like 30 feet, I mean, I think it's technically supposed to be a 30-foot social distance sort of situation. So, it's like, why are we operating with like goofy science here? And why are we so inconsistent in policies that we try to enforce and try to...
I've got the answer to that.
This is the most poorly managed crisis ever.
I've got the answer to why are we operating with goofy science? Because if we do not allow science to be challenged with other ideas that we might think are goofy as well, if we don't allow that, then science doesn't get better. Science doesn't challenge itself. We still think the world's flat because that's what you're supposed to think. If you think that and you don't allow challenge, you never find the truth. There's even a group of flat earthers, Adam, out there who say, well, wait a minute, I think the earth actually may be flat. And we laugh at that, and that's fine to laugh at that. But welcome it to the discussion, because if you do, truth will always win out. And I've said this again and again. If you're new to My Michelle Live, you'll hear it now and you'll hear it in the future. Even God doesn't say, you shall not challenge me, you shall not question me. He says, come, let us reason together, test me, try me, prove me. These are words that you'll hear in the Bible. Because if God says, go ahead, search it out, he's not afraid, why should we be?
Well, if you walk in truth, you have nothing to fear, right? I mean, God ain't scared. It's no problem. You're right on. And so I think a lot of this is just, those in power trying to use fear to control us. That's really what it is. Especially now, recognizing how the White House is trying to ramp up ridiculous COVID restrictions, these discussions of lockdown policies, in-person education. It's funny because they basically tell you what's about to happen by saying, we're not considering doing this. The Mayor de Bozo in New York, right? Bill de Blasio I think it was last week, he was saying, New York is not currently considering lockdowns or mandates or vaccine proof of vaccination, right? Well, here we are now. We see New York City where you cannot go into indoor spaces without proof of vaccination. You can't go into restaurants. You can't go into gymnasiums. Can't go into venues. You can't really do much without proof of vaccination. President Biden, federal workers cannot travel for work without proof of vaccination. If you are not vaccinated, you must submit to 2 COVID tests a week. You have to wear a mask all the time. And, you have to name your next unborn child after President Biden as well. It's just where does it end? It's a really,
don't joke about that. We don't know what's next.
It's like little baby Joe.
Yeah.
Isn't she pretty?
It's happening all over California, here in Seattle. They just listed over 100 restaurants where your kind is not welcomed here. I want to linger on that for just a moment and think about, how do you think it developed where we hated people because of the color of their skin, where people who were Black in the United States of America were not allowed to use the same water fountains, had to go to the back of the bus, were not allowed in restaurants or bars? How do you think that happened? If you look at that and say, that is freaking reprehensible, think about how it happened. Somewhere along the lines, people were saying, well, that's just science. If you think of Darwinian evolution, there are some people who are less evolved than others, right? They used fake science, flawed science. And people said, well, maybe this is just a good idea. And they bought into it without allowing it to be questioned. I put a post on Facebook on a page that talks about the cancel culture. And it was from my city. The news story I just gave to you, over 100 restaurants and bars not allowing people who are vaccinated. I said, is vaccination the new racism? Is our cancel culture causing us to hate on a people group? And a woman commented and said, no, this is just science, health, and common sense. And I said, science, health, yes, but only part of the science, part of the health. And so not common sense. If you are not listening to all of the science, if you're not allowing your science to be challenged, then honey, you are not making these vaccine manufacturers be responsible. You are not going to get better vaccines. If we say there's some problems, you're not going to know what's really happening. In order to propel ourselves as a society, we stay stuck in the dark ages thinking the earth is flat. Her response, you're going to love her response. Well, it's just a good idea. Again, I had to respond. I have a hard time shutting up. I know. I said, okay, good for me, but not for thee. When it's my idea and I shut everybody out, it's not cancel culture. It's when you do it that it's cancel culture. That's what the problem is. And it's the problem that we are allowing ourselves to not have this conversation.
I think if that conversation happened in Texas and, Michelle's talking to that person, I think a text would have been like, honey, bless your heart. But by saying bless your heart, she's really saying effing
you're
moron.
An idiot. What the heck? I know. How do y'all get away with that? My family's from the South. And my mom would do that all the time. Oh, yeah. Bless your heart. Or you could say something horrible. You are the ugliest, most horrific person I've ever met in the world. Bless your heart. And then it's okay. Y'all get away with it.
It's almost like, with all due respect, and then insult. Insert insult here.
Yeah, it's true.
If I'm being honest, were you not going to be honest? It's just it's so good. Michelle, it's interesting though. The whole concept of, it's just a good idea. Congressman Massey was talking about the data, right? The science, and the CDC, and all of these people keep pointing to basically unpublished data, right? They're trying to cite data that's not actually publicly available or that hasn't necessarily been peer reviewed. And in the scientific community, a peer review is an opportunity to accept scrutiny, to live in truth, and then to have other scientists who are credible and qualified to ask really hard questions to say whether or not your research, holds water. And so to see all these people sort of saying, "Oh, it's the science," well, no, it's not, because it's not published, first of all. And when it is published, it needs to be peer reviewed and scrutinized. And then that's when you have to be allowed to ask questions. But I think, Michelle, we were talking about different therapies and different ways of combating COVID. You have really credible people being shut down. You have doctors, Dr. Robert Malone. There's also Professor Satoshi Omura, who won a Nobel Prize at one point. It sounds like credibility to me. Basically, this person won a Nobel Prize for work on a drug called ivermectin. And, so we have very credible people who are saying, hey, you know what? I have a good idea. We should at least hash this out and see how
let me play a soundbite on that, because I don't want to just give our thoughts and our opinions. I want to give some of these news stories. This is Dr. Pierre Kory before a Senate. He's giving a Senate testimony on ivermectin and prophylaxis. The reason this is important is you're listening, is that in order to have these emergency use acts for what they're calling vaccines, they have to not have any protocol or treatment. There has to be no known treatment for a disease. This is what Dr. Pierre Kory had to say. Take a listen.
Brandy Parker McFadden sits in her Vanderbilt hospital bed.
No. That's the wrong one. Sorry about that.
Brandy Parker McFadden sits in her Vanderbilt hospital bed, unable to stand.
Well, I'll see if I can find it. But he says that these drugs are indeed
rare. The mother of 3 received her second Pfizer COVID shot.
I love technology.
Hours later,
it's
an
just
unusual
go ahead and
sensation
keep
started
playing
in her
for the
legs.
rest of my life here. Let's pause it there. Sorry about that. What he says is that ivermectin and prophylaxis are highly effective. Nobody should die if they're being treated with these. Hydrochloroquine had a lot of success as well, but they haven't gone through peer review, as you were talking about.
Right.
But we're not allowing that, and we're not moving forward. But we can use these experimental drugs. Anytime, let me just say this and see what you think as you're listening or watching. Your thoughts are welcome in the comments below, wherever you're listening or watching this. Anything that lists death as one of the possible side effects should never be forced on someone. It's a kind of a Russian roulette, as we're finding that there are people who are dying even though they have the the vaccine. But we're also seeing, Adam, let's take a moment to talk about some of the problems that people are experiencing with the vaccine, because the government's numbers are saying it's 50% of America. It's just not enough, right? So 50% of Americans aren't vaccinated, which means if you're shutting down restaurants voluntarily, you may have just lost 50% of your patrons. Think about that for a moment. Nonetheless, 50% of you who have the vaccine, are you taking care of yourself? Are you protected? Here's something that's happening, Adam, that they're finding, that those who have the vaccine, the mRNA in particular, it is causing microclotting. Now, those big clots that you've heard about, very rare. Yes, they are. Although we should know about it, because, that's a chance you take. The microclots, though, are happening in the majority, likely around 60, rough figure, 60%.
Wow.
Those microclots are a problem. And what's happening is that as we shoot trillions of these spike protein things into our bodies, they are breaking the blood-brain barrier. And so it could be causing permanent damage. A lot of people experiencing that fog. The clotting happens. our small arteries is where it goes, and it becomes spike protein factories that never shut off, just go into crazy production. So your body starts fighting against itself. And we're seeing problems with the heart, with hearts. It's predicted that some people are going to be experiencing heart attacks, heart problems in the next 3 to 5 years. I want to play Dr. Hotze talking about the study that he's doing.
D-dimer is a blood test that will show up a recent clot. It won't show up an old clot. It shows up a new clot. And it doesn't tell you where the clot is. It just tells you that the clotting mechanism has been activated. So I have now been recruiting patients from my practice, people that have come into my office and others that have heard me speak about this, and have asked people to do this D-dimer within 1 week of their COVID shot. And so far, and this study is ongoing, these are preliminary results, so far I've got 62% positive elevated D-dimer, which means that the blood clots are not rare. That's what the so-called experts keep telling us. The clots are rare, the big ones are rare, but the small ones are clearly happening in the majority of people, 62%.
Yeah, I'd like to ask him if those D-dimers are not showing, do they not show up later? Does your body correct it? Right. I don't know, but this is what he says is some of the problems and concerns of that.
Now, I'll tell you what the real concern with this is. A clotted vessel is permanently damaged. That vessel never, ever goes back to normal. All of the frequent side effects of the shot, which is headache, nausea, dizziness, fatigue, I mean, those literally, you could be having thousands and thousands of tiny, tiny little clots in your brain that won't show on a scan, but they will give you those exact symptoms. The concern is because these vessels are now permanently damaged in a person's lungs, when the heart tries to pump blood through all those damaged vessels, there's increased resistance trying to pump the blood through those lungs. So those people are going to develop something called coronary artery hypertension, high blood pressure in their lungs. And those people will probably all develop right-sided heart failure within 3 years and die, because they now have increased vascular resistance through their lungs, and lung tissue and heart tissue and brain and spinal tissue and all of that does not regenerate.
Yeah.
Wow. So, Michelle, I was literally just picking up a stat from the CDC itself, and about 25% of Americans deal with hypertension. And today, heart disease is the leading cause of death in the United States.
Yeah.
So we think about, you know, the amount of obese people in our country, diabetics. I mean, just there are so many issues that already exist today that are now complicated because of this alone.
Yeah. And if we're going to start seeing this more and more, look, I want to get this out there, not just to say, why aren't we talking about it, but to protect those who have been vaccinated. There are some things that you can do that some doctors are recommending. Some of the properties that you see that are in red wine, in pineapple, have a great effect on some of these microclots. From what I understand, I'm not a doctor, but I want to make that information known because you're not hearing the whole story. So while we are saying that your kind is not welcome here, here's something else I want your thoughts on, Adam. This being the new racism in a way, let's take it to this level. And I want you to think about this and get your thoughts. One of the biggest people groups in America that doesn't have the vaccine, we've said, is Black Americans. Black Americans aren't getting the vaccine. So when you're in this age where everything is racist, tell me why that's not racist. Your kind is not welcome here. Not vaccinated, your kind's not welcome here. We've turned weird.
Man,
and let me just say this for a moment. I understand your concern if you're saying that, you know, health and safety. But if you're not looking at the whole story, we're seeing that that vaccinated people can be spreading and can contract. And shall we share these news stories from around just the country? Massachusetts, I'm going to share this article and you'll be able to see it as you're watching. The CDC is reporting this, Adam. 74% of people infected in Massachusetts with COVID-19 outbreak were vaccinated. 74%. And one more, and I'd like to get your thoughts. In Jerusalem, the Jerusalem Post is reporting this. You can find it everywhere. Israel is banning. Now think about this. While we're banning unvaccinated, Israel is banning the vaccinated. They are one of the most aggressively vaccinated countries in the world. 90% of their adult population are vaccinated, and they are having a huge outbreak. They're closing their borders to the vaccinated because 80% of the people in the hospital with COVID-19 are vaccinated. Adam.
Well, first of all, on the Israel topic, what the heck do they know that we don't? You know, like they were so adamant to the point of mandating their entire country to get vaccinated. It didn't matter whether you were pregnant, didn't matter whether or not you were fighting cancer, buddy, you're getting that shot in your arm, and that's it. And so now this is just a 180, you know, and I would expect a 180 from, you know, most any policy coming out of the White House today. But, you know, Israel's a little bit more consistent when it comes to their policies. So to hear this, it makes me wonder, okay, well, what the heck do they know that we don't know? Is there some data that the CDC has that is not publishing, that it's not publishing, and it's making decisions based on that as well? I don't think the American public is being given the full story. I don't think we have from the start. And, you know, because of the political context of everything that we're experiencing, you know, a lot of those in the Black community that you were kind of talking about, Michelle, in a lot of cases, we're talking about more conservative religious people here. A lot of great people that, you know, I think you might be able to point to as the champions of the civil rights movement. We're talking about, you know, more of the Southern Baptists, the Southern Protestant Christians. And these are people that don't have a lot of trust for what's being told to the American public, and rightfully so. Science isn't science anymore, and the news is all sensational, and it's all designed to scare you or to get a click to an advertisement. And it's just junk, and people are tired of it. People just want the truth, and can you blame them? So to now kind of create this environment where if you are someone who rightfully doesn't trust some of the news that we've been given or told, and rightfully doesn't trust this new definition of science, now you're being pushed to this class of people that says, well, either you show me your vaccine passport, your proof of vaccination, or you don't get to exist with the rest of society. And I think it's just total garbage, Michelle. I think on one side of the fence, specific to, you know, the 180 from Israel, where's the data? What's going on there? I think we should definitely dig into that. And specific to what's going on in our country with New York City now saying, you know, to enter indoor spaces, you have to show your proof of vaccination, knowing that that's going to alienate a lot of people who are in the Black community specifically. Yeah, I mean, it's like the Democrats have created a problem for themselves by not really living by values or science at this point.
We're in a very disturbing place, and we're not listening to all of the concerns. If we were listening to all of the concerns, we could hold the vaccine producers accountable and say, make them better. If we do not talk about it, we will not make them better. And we are all the poorer for it. I played the soundbite in Wednesday's broadcast of Candace Owens giving us some food for thought. If you have to be coerced, if you have to be forced, if you have to be manhandled and bribed, is it really in your best interest? And it's just some food for thought. Take a listen.
If you have to be persuaded, reminded, pressured, lied to, incentivized, coerced, bullied, socially shamed, guilt-tripped, threatened, paid, punished, and criminalized, If all of this is considered necessary to gain your compliance, you can be absolutely certain that what is being promoted is not in your best interest.
Just some food for thought. And we're seeing that police resources all over the world are being employed to make sure everybody's complying to lockdown. Now, we're not talking about the zompocalypse here. We're not talking about something that is, at the danger level of of what we saw with Ebola and the like. We're seeing basically the same numbers as the flu, which, by the way, has gone the way of the dinosaur. There is no more flu. Why is that? You might take into consideration and do your own research on this. Don't just take my word for it. Be willing to listen. God bless you. That's great. But do your own research. One of the testing modes is being tossed out as of December 31st of this year because they're finding it gives too many false positives, because it takes everything, any kind of symptom that you might have that is COVID-esque, and it's calling it COVID. So we
could
really
be a
may
cucumber,
not know the numbers.
You could be a cucumber or a donkey and take that test, and it's going to say you have COVID. That's just it's really crazy.
Yeah, and so we're employing a lot of resources to an already depleted police force to make sure that everybody is in compliance. This is crazy. So until we get to where the government says, and that goalpost changes, ask yourself why all the time. If we comply enough, then we can have our freedoms back, as if they're the ones who get to control our freedoms. That's not how a free society works.
Well, it's like the New York City vaccine or proof of vaccination situation. If you want to enter indoor spaces, you got to prove that you've been vaccinated. Well, if Black Lives Matter, right? Well, if you're Black and unvaccinated, we don't care. It's kind of what they're saying. The hypocrisy from the unscientific, illogical left is beyond me. And we just saw a strong example of this coming from squad member Congresswoman Cori Bush. She's been really, really vocal about calling for a defund while paying, Michelle, this is a lot of money, paying $70,000 for her own private
this is so
security.
Uncomfortable.
It's so uncomfortable.
Embarrassing.
And it's like the people that are saying, you know what, guys, we think that cops should be defunded and that you as Americans shouldn't have the right to own a gun. But I can have a private security team of 20 around me because, well, I'm special. It's ridiculous. So I got to say, my Hypocrite of the Week award, and I just made this up, right? My Hypocrite of the Week award is going to have to go to Cori Bush for literally constantly crying to defund the police, and now kind of looking to really what has happened kind of at a high level across our country. Different mayors of different large cities, they've all been crying to defund the police, and I'm going to kind of go through a couple here. But before I leave the Cori Bush topic, I do want to point to, I think, something that was potentially maybe inspiring. I don't know, but definitely something positive here from a minister in Boston. Kind of going back to Massachusetts here, Michelle, but this gentleman, Reverend Eugene Rivers III, was slamming Cori Bush's comments about defunding the police, despite her $70,000 private security force. And he was kind of pointing out the fact that, you know what, the poorest Black neighborhoods in Boston are actually doing pretty well. And in fact, by improving the tools and resources that the police have, and then following this model that is a combination of faith-based organizations and law enforcement partnerships, you're actually able to create some real good in areas that otherwise, if you look at like places like Chicago, the rough parts of New York, other big cities in our country that don't have these faith-based organizations partnering with the police, I mean, Boston is doing it right now. And so, I think back to what David Brown was trying to do when he was here in Dallas, and now he's in Chicago, and God bless him. Good luck, man. I feel for him just for what he's dealing with. But this idea of you don't have a police force to run around carrying guns. You have a police force that's there to really create a relationship with the community that they care about and that they serve. And we were earlier in the episode, we were kind of saying, this Biden border crisis is creating not only problems with COVID, but also, problems on the police side of things. I don't want to lose sight of this one story, Michelle, that I'll share pretty quickly. There's not a whole lot to it, but it's just sort of an anecdote. And a body cam was just released of an event that took place on July 3rd. Body cam footage was just released that showed a sheriff's deputy in California basically experiencing an accidental fentanyl overdose.
I have that footage if you want to show it.
Absolutely. I'm not going to lie, I teared up watching this footage. It was the story from his partner about how he saved this deputy trainee's life. Michelle, let's check out this footage.
You're okay. Don't be sorry. There's nothing to be sorry about. I got you, okay? I'm not going to let you die. I'm not going to let you die. It's okay. Just focus on your breathing, okay? Focus on it. I need Narcan! I'm Corporal Scott Crane from the San Diego County Sheriff's Department. My trainee was exposed to fentanyl and nearly died. It was our first radio call of the day, and this was Deputy Five Eyes' radio call. He found a white substance that he suspected was drugs.
It's a powder.
Cocaine or fentanyl. It tested positive for fentanyl. This stuff's no joke, dude. It's super dangerous. I was like, hey, dude, too close. You can't get that close to it. A couple seconds later, he took some steps back, and he collapsed. I ran over to him, and I grabbed him, and he was ODing. And I went to my trunk, grabbed the Narcan, came down to him, grabbed him, and I did one nasal spray in one nostril, opened the other one, another nasal spray in the other one.
I remember just not feeling right, and then I fall back. And I don't remember anything after that.
Just breathe better. Trying to get him to focus on just breathing, and because that fentanyl, you can't breathe.
It was in an instant. It's as though my lungs just locked up. I couldn't breathe. I was trying to gasp for breath, but I couldn't breathe at all.
Are you okay? Talk to me. Oh, no. Don't be sorry. You're okay. Don't be sorry. There's nothing to be sorry about. I got you, okay? I'm not going to let you die. I'm not going to let you die. I need Narcan! I got you. I'm trying to not let him go. I wanted him to know he wasn't alone. It's an invisible killer. He would have died in that parking lot if he was alone. Fire department got there, put him on the gurney. His eyes rolled back in his head, and he started to OD again. And he was ODing the whole way to the hospital.
I don't think people realize the severity of just how deadly it really is. I'm Deputy David Five Eye, and I almost died of a fentanyl overdose.
Wow, Adam, that is absolutely.
Isn't that crazy?
I don't have words. I don't have.
Fentanyl is 50 times more powerful than heroin. This guy, this deputy trainee overdosed three times on his way to the hospital. This guy was literally in proximity of a vehicle from an arrest suspect. He was in proximity of the back of a vehicle, maybe a foot from the gate of the small SUV. And just by being there, the microscopic amounts of fentanyl in the air literally caused him to collapse and immediately start overdosing. If that guy was by himself, he would have been dead for sure. And, you think about what these police put themselves through, what these officers do to protect our communities. And then you realize that, more fentanyl has been brought to our country than could kill the entire population, right? Like since the border opened up. It's insane how much drugs are coming across the border. And these guys are trying to stop them from getting into our communities. On a previous episode, Michelle, I've shared that, when I was an undergraduate in school, this kid that I was the orientation leader of died from fentanyl. He was with his friends and he took it recreationally and did not survive it. This stuff does come close to home, and it will hit the most privileged communities that exist in our country. Whether you come from, a place with like where you're lucky to have sheets, or a place where you have Egyptian cotton with like this 100,000 thread count, right? Like whether you live in luxury or not, fentanyl is a drug that will get your community. And so to see what this deputy trainee was kind of dealing with, it's really, really hard not to at least shed a tear or two. I know I did when I first watched this. I shared it with my wife as well. And I think about the hypocrisy of our politicians who are sitting here saying, guys, defund the police, take away their resources, take away their training, take away their ability to do their job in a safe way, take away their ability to go home safely at night.
And let me just say that there's a mindset out there that says it's not about less officers. It's about reallocating those funds to better help the community. Okay.
Right.
That's what I was saying. Bring those challenges to a narrative so that we can talk it through. So what is happening? Are the neighborhoods who need it the most getting better service in the wake of defunding the police or reallocating these funds? No, they aren't. We're seeing the rate of homicides go through the roof. And it's happening more frequently in the least advantaged neighborhoods.
There are literally, Michelle,
as well.
Well, there are literally no police zones in parts of Chicago where if there's a shooting, like the police aren't coming. They're gonna show up hours later to collect the bodies and cart them off. But if there's an issue, whatever it might be, the police are just not there. And they want to be there, but they're just not able to be there because of those who are in power. Chicago, Lori Lightfoot, between 2015 and 2000, Chicago spent a little over $17 million to guard what they have tagged as, quote, unnamed city officials in their official documentation. In 2020 alone, the security detail for Lori Lightfoot was $3.4 million. Look at the year before that, 2019, $2.8 million spent on her protection. So despite her saying defund the police, let's also cut 400 police from the city of Chicago, she then raises her private security budget from $2.8 million in 19 to $3.4 million spent on her in 2020. I think at one point in her neighborhood, she had her street blocked off so that protesters could not approach her residence. The hypocrisy is beyond me. And, it's just like, it's like more of the same. San Francisco right now, London Breed, the mayor, London Breed, not quite as bad, but a lot of their commitments to divest $120 million haven't played out yet. But the mayor spent $100,000 more on security in 2020 than the year before. New York City is where you see shocking numbers, cutting $1 billion from a $6 billion police budget. One of the most iconic cities in our country. We're talking about cutting $1 billion from that police budget. I mean, like, did we forget about 9/11? Did we forget about just if see something, say something? Why does Mayor DeBozo have a private security detail for his wife and son? Is it because they need it? Well, if so, why do they need that private security detail?
And why do we not get that kind of protection? That's the crazy thing to me, the hypocrisy that you were talking about, Representative Cori Bush. And she was saying, well, I have such important work to do, and I need that. There's been threats to me and I have important work to do. So once again, like we saw with the lockdowns, the government is the ones who decide who is essential, who is not, who's important, who is not, who gets protection, who is expendable. These are things that we should be thinking about. Doesn't that make you uncomfortable? Or do you think I'm crazy? Go ahead, comment below.
Please
Just
do.
saying.
Well, I know when my younger sister was living in Brooklyn, she didn't have a private security detail. And whenever she had issues, she had to handle them herself and wait for the proper authorities to get there. But it wasn't like she had, security on demand. It's like, oh, let me just hit the speed dial real fast and they know my name. These politicians live in this alternate reality. I mean, it was New Year's Eve, right? At the ball drop in New York, Mayor DeBozo is sitting there dancing with his wife amid a shutdown where nobody else can be there enjoying Times Square, but he's there slow dancing to some music. It's just insane. Gavin Newsom dining at nice restaurants despite the fact that nobody else can, and then Pelosi and other politicians going to salons and getting their hair done, but opening those salons so that they can experience a private service. It's not really fair.
Well, Obama is scaling back his 60th birthday party, but he came under a lot of fire because he's invited hundreds of the former administration officials, celebrities, to honor him in Martha's Vineyard.
Wow.
And so, it's like it was this big deal, and there were big party plans months in the making. So this has been since COVID. Many invitees had already arrived in Martha's Vineyard, and then Barack Obama belatedly announced that he was canceling his 60th birthday bash that was scheduled for Saturday due to the Delta virus. So I'm going to say,
he's like, my PR team said.
maybe, but I'm going to say good for him.
Yeah.
I'm sure he didn't want to fall under condemnation. He thought twice about it, and he could have very easily just said, I'm going to do what I want to do. He's not president anymore.
It's true.
You can put him under criticism for even planning it and waiting until the last minute to say, okay, maybe this isn't a good idea, but at least I want to give kudos to Barack Obama for canceling it. Just like you said, there's a lot of hypocrisy. And
There
so
is.
good for you for not giving in. In the end, he did a consistent thing, we'll say. Right or not? I'll just say
I'm still
consistent.
telling you, he's a guy that I would drink a beer with. I think he's got a lot to say, and yeah, I mean, I'm sure it'd be a good conversation even if we don't.
You
agree on
won't
it.
drink a beer now if you're not vaccinated, probably. But
Not in New York. Definitely not in New York. You have to
invited down there to the free country of Texas.
visit us in the Republic of Texas. We'll give you some like a local brew. It'll be good. It's crazy though. It's really crazy. And it kind of comes down to also just the way our media and the way, when I say media, I mean the news media and social media kind of come together to protect these politicians. Man, it is really something special. And I've got my dog kind of pawing at me here, kind of showing me how she feels about it. And she's really upset about the fact that all of these political leaders are given such favoritism. Whether she's very astute, I should tell you.
I'm sorry, I just freaking snorted on air. Oh my gosh. Okay.
This pug knows what's up.
I'm sorry.
But whether it's our political leaders or our scientific thought leaders, we're not able to get the true story, and that's really a big concern of mine, and one that frankly, I'm so thankful to Michelle for being such a great guiding light for us and for the program. And I think we need more people asking more questions and not less people doing the opposite of that. We've kind of discussed concerns of self-censorship.
Excuse me. And that's where I want to intervene here with a shameless plug, if I might.
Always.
Because you and I have both experienced being canceled on social media for speaking facts, sharing news stories, not just us getting on and talking about our opinions, for reasons that we don't know. We've experienced it, and I want to share this that is available on our website. It is this is our new I can't hear you over all this freedom. That's not the one I was looking for. I'm really
so good.
Yeah, I'm really looking for the My Michelle Live will go up here. We have some canceled t-shirts. We have the I'm Not Afraid to Be Canceled t-shirt I want to get to. There we go. I'm Not Afraid to Be Canceled. That is available. It's $15. Not afraid to be canceled. So you may want to pick yours up and just let people know the reason we want these things. We want to sport these things, or the canceled t-shirt, Adam, is because we want to let people know that there are people who are willing to speak up with their opinion and and facts that can contribute to the national narrative, even if it risks being canceled. And I think it was Jennifer Aniston is now the next big star who said, "Hey, I've told people and unfriended people who aren't vaccinated, that bragging about your so if they can brag about your canceling, they're canceling, we can say, hey, you're not going to intimidate me from talking. We can have, there's great people who are vaccinated and think differently on political issues than me, that we talk about it. And then we have a beer. That's what freedom looks like, not canceling. So it's happening on social media. Again, there's a news story.
There is, yeah. So Wired magazine just kind of published this topic, right? This conversation about this decision that Facebook made to disable the accounts of researchers at New York University who were literally doing something that I think we would all like to see the results of. They were investigating how the company does political ad targeting, claiming that their investigation violated users' privacy. But as this report kind of noted, the researchers didn't actually violate users' privacy, not according to the consent decree set forth by the FTC in 2019. Which is actually what Facebook was kind of pointing to as the reason for terminating these accounts. These researchers were actually getting consent from internet users who use the Firefox browser. And they were basically saying, hey, can we have you install this plugin? And this plugin will basically monitor how you interact with the web, and it'll measure and kind of record which types of political advertising you get when you use Facebook. So internet users that were interested in this particular study would consent to this research team sort of understanding how their online behavior kind of translates into the actual political advertising they see through Facebook, right? Well, Facebook was saying, well, actually, you can't do that because it violates the user's privacy. They were citing basically this FTC decision that was made after they had the whole Cambridge Analytica smackdown, really. And they were trying to say, well, because of this FTC decision, we can't let you do that. But the reality is there's no commonality. There's nothing in common between what Facebook experienced with the Cambridge Analytica scandal and basically what came from that and how that impacts the researchers' ability to do what they're doing, which is just try to understand user activity and how Facebook decides to serve which type of ads to these people, right? And so the result from all of this basically was kind of a punitive one, where Facebook decided to ban the personal Facebook accounts of these NYU researchers, PhD students, mind you, banned the personal Facebook accounts of these students who were quite literally trying to help the public understand how Facebook decides to run its political advertising. I think the reason why Facebook did this, and this might be a conspiracy theory of my own, but I think there might be something to it here. It's because Facebook was afraid of what this research team was going to discover. So when you are an advertiser and when you're trying to be on social media and you're trying to get more customers, you put a little bit of money behind an ad campaign and let it run. The campaign will target your ads with people who are most likely to people customer profile, right? So am I going after people in Texas? Okay, cool. Am I going after business owners in Texas? Okay, got that. What's their age group? What are their interests? Things like that, right? I think Facebook was concerned about the fact that as it pertains to political advertising, there's a human element in there, sort of a different way of managing ad targeting, where Facebook's team can basically pick and choose which ads they want to see run, which people they want to see impacted by that kind of advertising. And the reality is when you're advertising for business, the AI does most of the work. When you're advertising with a political intent behind it, there's a human review there that Facebook doesn't want you to know about.
But they'll still take your money.
Oh, they will definitely take your money. Well, they'll take your money for sure, but they might not let your ad fly, right? Yeah. They might just serve your ad to people that already agree with you. And if you're trying to advertise to people that already agree with you, what are you going to gain, right? They're not letting you target people that you're trying to influence or people that you're trying to open the minds of. And so the fact that Facebook's team is able to make some of these decisions, knowing that they make these decisions with be it an implicit or an explicit political bias, there's not a whole lot of objectivity into their decision making, right? You hear a lot of concerns, right? Oh, it seems like a lot of conservative accounts or libertarian accounts are being banned or censored from Facebook. Yeah, that's true. It's because they're letting a lot of the far left content fly, and they're not letting a whole lot of the center or the center right content do the same, and that's just not fair.
Well, it's not only not fair, but when someone is going and researching it without political intent, and someone says, I want to see what's going on behind closed doors here. And someone says, nope, you don't get to do that. There's no accountability. There's no open reporting. There's no, you're closing off and you're saying you don't get to know what's happening. Doesn't that concern you? We're seeing that partnered with the cancel culture, the canceling of information, the canceling of ideas that you don't get to say.
Nobel Prize winners, Michelle,
Nobel Prize winners. And this is something to think about because we can learn from history. It's happened before. Listen.
In the public mind, constantly associate those who are. In 1943, the following directive was issued from party headquarters to all communists in the United States. It read, when certain obstructionists become too irritating, label them after suitable build-ups as fascist or Nazi or anti-Semitic, and use the prestige of anti-fascist and tolerance organizations to discredit them. In the public mind, constantly associate those who oppose us with those names which already have a bad smell. The association will, after enough repetition, become fact in the public mind.
So there you go, Adam.
Fact because they say it's a fact, right?
If you say it enough. Now, if you draw conclusions and say, hey, we're doing some things that look a little bit like Nazi Germany and some of the brown shirt tactics and the like, fine, let's talk about it. But we like to use an illogical arguments, and it's been labeled ad Hitlerism, where you just, if I call you a Nazi, that ends the argument. You can't escalate past that, so it shuts things down. You can't have conversation anymore, and it happens on both sides.
It really does.
All sides.
It's messed up because it really just does take away actual, like I would say, dialogues, right? All of a sudden it turns into somebody talking to you instead of somebody having a conversation with you.
Gosh, I hope this is opening someone's head and saying, oh my gosh, I've been doing this. No, but when we're seeing it from our government, you were talking about Facebook, and so the government is, as we talked about last week, has been working with social media to limit narratives. Even though you might have the PhD or the founder of one of these vaccines, mRNA, or recognized scientists and doctors, if it goes against what the government has decided is truth, it's a problem unless someone else is doing it. Remember that idea, good for me and not for thee. This is your president, Joe Biden.
Sanctions on individuals that carry out the regime's abuses. At the same time, we're increasing direct support for the Cuban people by pursuing every option available to provide internet access, help the Cuban people bypass censorship that's being mandatorily imposed. You always know something's not going well when the country will not allow their people to be engaged and be on the internet and being able to make their case known around the world.
Really? So
he's not very good when he has to transition from one teleprompter screen to another, because he's squinting really hard to try and read those words.
But you know what I did here is you'll always know something's amiss, something's wrong when a government won't allow their people internet access and information on the internet. What the heck?
It's crazy. I mean, but it's also funny too, and funny in like one of those like I'm crying tears, not of joy, but of just like painful tears, to literally see them try to sit here at, like they being Facebook and big tech in general, we're private companies. Well, if you're private companies, why are you operating with the White House and the California Secretary of State? Why are you operating with daily misinformation meetings with political staffers every day and making policy enforcement decisions every day based on those daily politically driven meetings? Are you truly a private company, or are you a political agent?
Ooh,
and
whoa,
political agent is kind of what's going on here. And it kind of goes back to that NYU research team. I think Facebook was just really afraid of what they were going to uncover. You know, whether what I think is true or not, there's something there, right? They're trying to hide something that's important for us to all.
Okay, well, let's talk about what Judicial Watch has uncovered. They received, I don't know, like almost 2,500 pages of documents from the CDC that showed that Facebook coordinated closely with the CDC to control that narrative. Just as I was saying, and Joe Biden was saying, hey, anytime you see that happening, that's a bad thing, but yet it's okay when we do it.
Michelle, if you have any, all right. So if any of you guys that are listening happen to do anything related to digital marketing or run a small business, what would $3.5 million of free advertising do for your business this year?
Oh, come on.
Just think about that, right? What sort of exposure would you bring to your brand? How many customers would you acquire? What could that do for you? The CDC worked with Facebook. Facebook gave the CDC $3.5 million of free advertising to basically just spread whatever messages they wanted. And this is all information that came from a FOIA request that our buddies over at Judicial Watch filed, and actual emails between the CDC leadership team and Facebook, the Twitter leadership team as well, and the CDC. And then also the Google YouTube team with the CDC's leadership team as well. A lot of discussions there about, you know, how can we help, and what would you like the message to be? What type of information would you like us to squash? They're basically carrying the flag, and they're kind of saying, okay, well, there are some industry experts out there that are saying X, Y, Z. Do we let that fly or not? And in a lot of cases, we saw industry experts being deplatformed and censored. And, you know, we're asking questions that matter, right? From looking at the early data around COVID or vaccine marketing in general, of those people that wanted to wait for a little bit before getting the vaccine, it's because they were waiting to get information that was really specific to their personal health situation, case studies, things like that. Instead, we had the government working with social media platforms to not give us what we wanted, which was real information, things that will actually speak to our personal health issues and help us decide, okay, well, first of all, getting the vaccine, yes or no? Okay, if so, which one? You know, at least giving us the information that we wanted. Instead, we have the government working with social media platforms to really just shove down, well, I guess the facts that aren't facts, right? Just the whatever they say, if they say it enough times, then people just start to believe it.
It becomes true, and you're not listening to the whole story, and you're not protecting yourself if you're vaccinated, if you're not finding out what some of the dangers are and how you can protect yourself. Are vaccines a good idea? Yeah, they can be a great idea. Is letting a company just run wild with zero accountability and 100% of the accountability and risk being on the individual getting the shot in their arm, that's not okay if we're not hearing everything. That's why programs like this are important. We are out of time, but man, chock full of good information, more to the story, things that I encourage you to please research for yourself. Don't just take my word for it and then go and tell people, yeah, I heard this. That's fine. Just look it up. We need to be informed. An informed public is a safer public.
Well, I got one for you, Michelle.
Yeah.
If ever there were a vaccine for BS, it's My Michelle Live.
Oh, no.
What?
Adam Rosari is with Agency Partners Interactive. You can get a link at My Michelle Live. He's our friend. So are his gorgeous dogs. Thanks, Adam. And we'll catch you next time.
Have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you.
For more fun, go to mymichellelive.com.
And that's a wrap.
And that's a wrap.